Short teaching today.
Yay.
We'll see how that goes.
Sure.
No, but really, I think it's a short teaching.
So you said.
So we're going to talk about, well, I'm going to give a teaching I've never taught on the midwives in Egypt, Shifra and Puah. I never taught on them. I never really looked into it, but it is kind of fascinating. And it leads right into, just like every other teaching I've been giving lately, the book I just finished. So I'm going to tie that in with it. Right after enumerating the 74 people that were part of Israel from his seed, is that correct? 74?
No, I thought it was 70.
It's 74, including Joseph, his wife, and his 2 kids. Ephraim and Manasseh, which is the kids of Joseph. So, including those 4, that's 74. And there's a whole huge teaching in that, but we're not going to go into it. I'm just going to skip it. And it comes to that whole generation basically gets old, they're ready to die off. And then this new king arises. Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Behold, the people of the sons of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them. Otherwise they will multiply, and in the event of war they will also join those who hate us, fight against us, and depart from the land." So they're afraid of these 4 things. They're afraid that they'll just become so many that they'll join Egypt's enemies, number 1. They'll fight against us with those enemies, number 2, and then they'll leave the land, number 3. But the 4th one is that they'll just like explode, the population explosion of these Jews. So there's really 4 things that they're scared of. So that's why they appointed taskmasters over Israel in Egypt. And then comes the whole Exodus story. But the whole thing started with, they were scared. Egypt was scared of these 4 things that Israel was just, there was like this enormous population explosion. You know why? This is what it says in the Talmud and the Midrashim, that they would have litters of 6 children apiece. Wow. That every birth in Israel was 6 kids. Like a litter of children. Wow. Like, what is that called? Sextuplets?
Very fertile.
Yeah, so like imagine tens of thousands of sextuplets. Now, whether that's true or not, physically true or not, the picture is clear and the picture is correct. So there's this explosion of Jews in Egypt. So they appointed taskmasters over them to oppress them with hard labor, and that's what the whole Exodus story comes out of. That's the first thing we quote in the Exodus story. And they built for Pharaoh storage cities, Pitom and Ramses. Pitom and Ramses. But the more they oppressed them, the more they multiplied. Like litters of 6 kids. And the more they spread out, so that they dreaded, see, they're terrified of the sons of Israel. The Egyptians used violence to compel the sons of Israel to labor, and they made their lives bitter with hard labor and mortar and bricks and all kinds of labor in the field. Now, what are they doing with all these bricks?
Building pyramids.
Building the city.
It doesn't say pyramids. The storage cities. These are called otsarim. An otsar is a treasure house. Otsarim is treasure houses, plural. And this is later on. This is, you know, when Joseph got great and he basically owned the land, right? Yeah. And they put all the grain. Well, this is where they put them. They put them in these storage cities or storage houses. But now they're making them into storage cities, like whole cities of storage stuff, of treasuries. Pitom and Ramses. Doesn't say anything about them building the pyramids. But a lot of people believe that, but it's not true. But the more they oppressed them, the more they got greater, and they used violence against the sons of Israel. all their labors, all kinds of labor in the field, all their labors which they violently had them perform. And it does use the word violence there. Had them perform as slaves. Then the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, and the other was named Puah. Now, before we talk about Shiphrah and Puah, do you remember me talking, it was 2 weeks ago, about Jewish slavery? Do you remember me talking about that? So the difference between Jewish slavery and Gentile slavery, you can see it right here. It's that word violence. Gentile slavery has always been the same. It's always been done with violence. You know, like the slavery in America. The Christian slavery in America, Christian slavery, is done with violence and hatred and prejudice. But Jewish slavery is taking the Gentiles in, owning them, and then getting them to know God. There's nothing violent or mean or hard or prejudice about it. But for the Egyptians on the Jews, it very much was. When you are helping, he said, the king, Paro said to Shiphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women to give birth, and you see them upon the stones, now we translated birth stool, but it's literally in Hebrew, avanim, stones. Why? Because the chairs for birthing, which I'll show you, were made out of stone. And there was a stone on one side and a stone on the other side, stone in the back, and they'd sit on that like a stool, and that's where they'd give birth. If it is a son, you shall put him to death. This is Pharaoh talking. If it's a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God. Now, because of this, Yirat Elohim, what's a Yirat Elohim?
It's a Gentile believer.
Yes, it's a Gentile believer, a God-fearer. So many of the sages said that Shiphrah and Puah were Egyptians, and they converted to Judaism. Might be.
Makes sense.
Midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt had told them, but let the boys live. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing and let the boys live? The midwife said to Paro, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, because they're like animals. That's what it says in Hebrew. They're like animals. They're chayot. They give birth before we can even get to them. They just pop those babies out. All 6 of them. And they're like animals. They're like, like animals who go out into the field and just give birth without anybody's help. Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They're chayot. They're animals. They're vigorous, lively. They're full of life, and they give birth before the midwife can even get to them. Now, they're probably lying through their teeth, but so what? I mean, think about all the, well, let me say it this way. In all the Christian commentaries I read, that's where they focus. Why did they lie? Why did they lie? Well, geez, I mean, think about all the lies that were told in the Holocaust. To save life. What's that called in Hebrew, to save a life? Anybody know?
It's a little
P, a P. Pikuach nefesh, to save a soul. Pikuach nefesh.
Is that the same word that like churches will use to operate on the Sabbath to save the life?
Yes, it's exactly the same principle and concept that allows us to do anything to save a life on Shabbat. Anything. Doctors, anything. Any situation that comes up that if it's between keeping Shabbat and life and death, you choose life every time.
Fix the heater in the wintertime.
Yeah, sure.
Rashi,
If it's life and death, yeah.
Right.
Rashi talks about the killing of a son over the killing of a daughter was because, says the boys would eventually grow up to go to war.
Yes, the
Whereas
boys will
women-
eventually grow up to go to war, and the women,
didn't, which
they
is
did.
interesting because in Israel ends up being a nation that has
Both men and women going to war. That's how Israel ended up, because it's in the Torah that both men and women can go to war. But they didn't do that in Egypt. Well, that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons that that the sages say Paro did this. All right. So, because they lied through their teeth, and I like saying that, because they lied, God was good to the midwives. That's why he was good to them, because they lied, and what they did was they produced and built Israel. And that's why God was good to them, because so it's a lie, big deal. They built Israel, and that's what we're going to talk about. So, because they feared God, there it is again, because the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very mighty. Why? Because of them lying. And that's why God gave them houses, because midwives feared God. He established houses for them. Now, what does that mean? He established houses for them. That's what we're going to talk about. Now, usually what that means is, like, gave them a big family and it's called a dynasty, but it's a big family. Not really what it means. That's only one little tiny part of it. We're going to talk about what that means. Then Paro told all his people, saying, every son who is born you are to throw into the Nile, but every daughter you are to keep alive. Now, this is a still from the Prince of Egypt. You can't really see it very well because it's so dark, but this is hieroglyphics of all the babies being thrown into the Nile, and there's two big giant leviathans, crocodiles down in the bottom, ready to eat up the babies. And then in the movie, those people come to life and they like bring the babies and they throw them into the water. Well, it wasn't throwing them into the Nile. That's not how it happened. What happened was they were exposed. You know, I mean, when I hear it, I want to lose my mind. But you hear about babies left in dumpsters, or babies just left out on the street, or babies just left somewhere out in the hills or whatever. That's what this is. It's called being exposed. They're exposed to the elements. Somebody just throws them out. In this case, they threw them out in the marshes near the Nile. Yes.
That's how Israel is described when it's like, and you are.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. So let's talk about Shifra and Puah. Now the rabbis say that Shifra and Puah are really Yocheved and Miriam. Who is Yocheved?
Moses' wife.
Yosef. It's Moshe's mommy. This is his mom. Remember, the three children of Yocheved are Aaron, Miriam, and then the baby Moses. Okay? He was the baby. He was the youngest of the three. Shifra. Why was she called Shifra? Her name is Yocheved, but she's called Shifra. Why? Because she's known as Shifra because she would improve, mishaferet. Now this word improve, they translate it a bunch of different ways. Straighten, beautify, clean. There's other words that they use that midwives do to the baby. That's that word mishaferet. The physical condition of the newborn by the care that she provided. And Puah, this was Miriam. Why was she known as Puah? Because she used to call out, Puah. Speak, which means speak. It's a word for speaking. And croon, crooning means singing nowadays. Or it has since like the 1850s, I think. But it really means to coo. Coo, coo. You know, like when you talk to babies. I think a baby. That's cooing. That's Puah. Because it's onomatopoetic. That means it is what it sounds like. Puah, puah. To the newborn in the way women soothe crying babies. Puah is an expression of crying out also. As in, like a woman in labor, I will cry out. If'eh. If'eh. It's the same word as puah. If'eh. Who is this crying out in Isaiah 42? Like a woman in labor, do you know?
Israel.
It's not Israel. That's what I would have guessed. But it's not. Anybody know? God. So, there's a couple verses that say God is going to go through the birth pangs while Israel goes through the birth pangs. What the church calls the tribulation. That while Israel is going through the birth pangs, God himself is going through the birth pangs. And this is one of them. Like a woman in labor, I, God, will cry out. Now the verse states, this is that was from Rashi, but this is from Talmud and Sota 11b. The verse states, and the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives. The name of the one Shifra, the other was Pua. Rav and Shmuel disagree as to the interpretation of this verse. Now, this is not like Christians disagreeing. When Jews disagree, anybody know what that's called? Like no, it's not pilpul. That's a good guess, though. In the Talmud, when the rabbis disagree, it's called something. It's called, Machlochet Hashemayim. Machlochet Hashemayim. Machlochet is an argument. What does Hashemayim mean?
Heaven.
For heaven. It's an argument for the sake of heaven, which is why it's included in the Talmud. This is not some old dudes arguing with each other. This is God saying two separate things at the same time, and both of them are true. And the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, the name of the one Shifra, the name of the other Pua. Rav and Shmuel disagree as to the interpretation of this verse. One says these midwives were mother and daughter. The other says that they're mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. So, the one who says that these midwives were mother and daughter, according to him, it's Yocheved, the mother of Moses and Aaron, and her daughter Miriam. But according to the one who says it was daughter-in-law and mother-in-law, the verse is referring to Yocheved and Elisheva. Who's that? Who's it? The wife of Aaron. But it is therefore Yocheved's daughter-in-law. Yes? Does that make sense? Yes or no?
Yeah.
He's not responding at all, so I'm not sure if he gets it. So you got to say something so I know if you get it. If you don't, I can re-explain it. I can try something else. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay. So Yocheved is the mom, yes? Yocheved is Shifra. Miriam, her daughter is Pua. Miriam's the sister of Moses. Who's the other kid of Yocheved? Miriam, Moses, and who? Aaron. Okay. So the other rabbi is saying, no, it's not Miriam who's Pua, it's Elisheva who's Pua. And who is she married to? Aaron, right? Now, why? Why is that? Because remember, it said, because the midwives feared God, God established houses for them. Houses, households, yes? What's the house of Moses? Anybody know? The king. I don't know if you know. Did you know Moses was the king of Israel? Yeah, that's what all the sages say. He was the king of Israel. You didn't know that? So his house is the house of the king. Whose house is Aaron? The priests. Now, from the very beginning of the story in the Bible, the house of Judah, I know Moses is not from Judah, but before Judah became the king house, Moses was the king's house. And from the very beginning, the house of Judah intermarried with the house of Levi, making the house of the king and the house of the priest together as one house. In other words, a priest king. Does that make sense? So it's a picture. It's not real, it's a picture. The picture is that whoever Shifra and Pua is, it's the mom and either the king or the priest. That's why this is important. Did you follow that?
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say about this whole thing. That's why I have it here. But that's all I'm going to talk about with this. That it's just to say, the picture is already established. The priest and the king are one. Together. All right, so now Shiphrah, her name means beauty or brightness, which we're going to look at. And why was she called Shiphrah? Because she was 130 years old, and she returned to her beauty as it was when she was a young kid. Who else did that happen to? Sarah. So just like Sarah, she also looked like a youth. Remember, Abimelech wanted her because she was so hot at the age of what? 90.
Or something.
80 and 90. He wanted her because she was so hot at the age of 80 and 90. So, in the same way, Shiphrah was also beautiful. And because her deeds were pleasing, shapru, same word, Shiphrah, shapru, pleasing, doing them not for herself in any way, but only for the sake of heaven. What did she do for the sake of heaven?
She let the boys live.
Yes, she let the boys live. She was a midwife for Israel that let the boys live. Puah, her name means Miriam. Now all the words having to do with Puah are about the mouth. Crying out, cooing, speaking. They're all Puah. They all have to do with the mouth. And she was a prophetess, a mouthpiece. She led the praises and prophesied after crossing through the Reed Sea, right? She spoke po'ah. See, there's another word for speaking. Po'ah. Po'ah. Just like puah. By the Spirit about her mother giving birth to the Savior. This is not Yeshua.
No.
This is not talking about Yeshua. Who's the Savior of Israel? Moses. So she prophesied about her mom. What's her mom's name? Yocheved, giving birth to the Savior of Israel, Moshe. All right, let's talk about more meanings of the name Shiphrah. Shiphrah means brightness or beauty, but it comes from shafar, which means to scrape or to polish, to smooth, to be bright, beautiful, brilliant, and therefore shofar. Why is it called shofar? Not so much because the shofar is bright and smooth, but because the sound it produces is bright. And that's why it's called the shofar. Job 26:13 says this. This is an amazing verse. Barucho, in his spirit, or by his spirit, Shemaim, heavens, Shiphrah. Just comes right out and says, Shiphrah. By his spirit, the heavens were Shiphrah. By his spirit, the heavens were whatever she's named. You get what I'm saying? So how would you translate that? I don't know how to translate it. By his spirit, the heavens were bright, beautiful, smooth, brilliant, a loud sound. I don't know how to pronounce, how to interpret it. But whatever Shiphrah is, that's what God made the heavens. All right, you see the connection here? That Shiphrah, by building Israel, by letting the babies live and building Israel, God made the heavens into that, making Israel live. Does that make sense? So it creates an immediate connection between the heavens and what? Israel. Israel. So you're going to see in a bit that that's what the rabbi said. That she did what God did. God made the heavens Shiphrah. And so Shiphrah basically created that connection, just like God did, between heaven and Jews. We'll talk more about that. Psalm 16, the Lord is the portion of my inheritance. The lines, the way it says it in English is, the lines fall to me in pleasant places. What does that mean? Well, the word lines here is not really lines, it's like a measuring line, which is a chevel. What is chevel? Chevle.
Oh, pains.
Birth pangs. Why? Because it's twisted, like a woman being twisted in birth pangs. And she groans in her birth pangs. Well, this is the word, like they twist cords together. Twisted cords. So it's a measuring line or a twisted cord. So I'm going to call it measuring lines or my measurement. Like God has measured a thing for me in pleasantness. I have a shafra heritage. What's your heritage? Beautiful, shining, bright, brilliant. What did God make the heavens? Shifra. So this is our inheritance. Our inheritance is Shifra or Shafra. Does that make sense? It looks like it's kind of going over your heads, but I'm trying to make it understandable. Does that make sense so far? Whatever Shifra is, whatever she did, God did that for the heavens. And then God said, that is your inheritance. Jews, Israel, that's your inheritance. She's the one who did that. She made you live. We're going to look at this verse again, but right here, I want you to see this verse. Ezekiel 16, it tells this long parable, fairly long parable, about the birth of Israel. Where was Israel born? Do you know where Israel was born? In Egypt? That's correct. Israel was born in Egypt. That's what the scriptures say. As for your birth, on the day you were born in Egypt, your navel cord was not cut. You weren't washed with water for cleansing. You were not rubbed with salt, which is how they'd get all the blood and goo off the babies, or even wrapped in cloths. Okay? Nobody did that for Israel because nobody cared. She was hated. Remember it said that the Egyptians were terrified of Israel? Well, it also says in that passage that we read that they were repugnant or disgusting to the Egyptians. Because the Egyptians were disgusted with the Jews. They hated them. And so when she was born as a people, nobody took care of her. But Shifra and Puah did. And so therefore, Shifra and Puah are a picture of whoever birthed Israel and took care of her. Now her name, Shifra, because Israel was fruitful, Shapru. Remember it said there's like, how many babies were born at a time?
6.
6. A litter of 6 Jews each time. That's fruitful. That's Shapru. Sh, Paru. Sh means who, and Paru means fruitful. Who is fruitful in their days? All right? That's why she's named Shifra. I don't know what her real name was. Her real name was not Shifra. And I don't know even if she was a Jew or an Egyptian. I don't know. But I know what she's a picture of. Now the same thing holds true for Puah. Her name has meanings too that say the same thing. Basically, Puah, let's see, Puah, because she used to call out, Po'ah, speak and coo to the newborn in the way that women soothe crying babies. Here's the word, Pu'ah. It's actually Pu'ah. I can't even do it right now. Pu'ah. Pu'ah. Now Arabic, Pu'ah, in Arabic, it is straight up the word mouth. It just means mouth. Hebrew for mouth is pei. So you can see the similar. And the letter pei, see there's a pei? And there's a pei. It's a mouth. And that thing's got a tongue in it. It's an open mouth with a tongue in it. So the letter pei means mouth. And it may be, the word pu'la, may be for yefu'la. Except, look at the difference in the letter. See the aleph?
Yeah.
Pu'ah, instead of an ayin, pu'la. But they're basically pronounced the same. So they're sort of interchangeable, which means splendid. At least that's the way they translate it. Maybe. But we know where it comes from. It comes from pa'a. It's a primitive root. It's onomatopoetic. That means it sounds like what it... Give me an English onomatopoetic word.
Bark.
How about boom?
Oh, yeah.
What would you say?
I said bark, but it's not.
Bark is close. So it sounds like what it is. How about hiss?
Yeah.
Sounds like what it is. Well, this is the same. In Hebrew, it's a little different because it's a different language. Pa'a, a primitive word, onomatopoetic, means to call out or to cry out, to scream. Pa'a! To bleat or bellow. To blow out or hiss like a snake. And so the word pa'a can literally mean a viper. Now, we go hiss. In Hebrew, it's pa'a, pa'a. That doesn't even relate to us. It sounds weird, but that's the way it is. Or it could also mean pa'a. See the ayin and the aleph? Basically interchangeable. Pa'a, to blow or to blow away. To cleave or split, to shatter to the corners. To blow it away, to from the mouth. Always with the mouth. Now here's that verse I showed you, Isaiah 42. God goes into birth pangs along with Israel. I have kept silent for a long time. I've kept still and restrained myself. Now, my restraint is over. Now, like a woman in labor, I will groan, I'll cry out. If'eh, just from the word pa'a. I will both gasp and pant. I will lay waste the mountains and the hills and wither all their vegetation. I'll turn the rivers into coastlands and dry up the ponds. I'll lead those who are blind by a way they have not known. So this is the destruction of the earth and God bringing the Jews back. It's the birth pangs. And God is going to go into birth pangs along with the Jews. Now here's another. This is from Sota in the Talmud, like the last ones we looked at. Puah, because she moaned and wept over her brother. Which brother?
Either Moses or Aaron.
Which one?
Moshe.
Yeah, remember she's there. They just threw him in the water to kill him.
Yeah.
And she's there like, oh, what's going to happen to him? What's going to happen to him? And she's, in Hebrew, she's moaning, puah, puah. As it is written, and his sister stood from afar to know what would be done with him. So she's kind of freaking out. And again, that's why Miriam is called Pu'ah. Okay, so what does Shifra mean?
Bright.
Beauty, bright, polish, smooth. And what does Pu'ah mean? Something with the mouth. Some kind of something with the mouth. All right. Now, this is where we make our turn and we see like what the picture is. This is really amazing. When Jacob had sex with the 4 wives, or women, or whatever they're called, and the 12 children were born, who is the house of Israel attributed to? Is it attributed to the women or to Jacob or Israel? Who's it attributed to? Let me say it this way. Who did God say built the house? Was the house built by Jacob, Israel, or was the house built by the 4 women? You think by the women?
Yes.
You don't know? It is by the women. Very good. So the women are attributed. God says, you women built the house of Israel. Well, the same is true here. Shifra and Puah, because they ran in there against what the king said to do and birthed those babies real fast and then lied about it, the whole house of Israel is attributed to these 2 women. And they might be Gentiles. They might be. I don't know. But certainly I'll show you that the whole house of Israel is attributed to them. That's why they're in the Bible. That's why they're important. Israel's house is attributed to these midwives. Ezekiel 16, this parable, it's only a part of the parable. that talks about when Israel was born. Your origin and your birth are from the land of the Canaanite. As for your birth, now this makes it sound like they were born in Canaan, doesn't it?
Yeah, not Egypt.
And not only does it say that, it says your mother was a Hittite and your father was an Amorite. Yeah.
Right.
But they weren't born in Canaan. They were born in Egypt. And we're told that 3 times in the scriptures. You were born in Egypt. Talking to Israel. So you're going to have to resolve that on your own.
Does that have to do with the fact that, yes, they may have been, a family unit, but when they actually get to Egypt is when they start uniting and basically trying to walk together and carry on what their father was given?
That is way too deep for me to follow. You're going to have to resolve for yourself, if you want to, why it says here your origin and your birth are from Canaan. I'll give you a hint. Canaan and Egypt are the same family. They're the same exact family. All you have to do is look at their genealogies, and you'll see what's going on here. But anyway, it says, as for your birth, on the day you were born in Egypt, your navel cord was not cut, you weren't washed with water for cleansing, you weren't rubbed with salt or even wrapped in cloths. No eye looked with pity on you. Yeah, they were throwing the babies out in the marshland, in the open field, on you to do any of these things for you, to have compassion on you. Rather, you were thrown out into the open field. This is not just metaphorical, it is real. They literally threw the babies out in the fields. For you were abhorred on the day you were born. See that word? Hated, abhorred, disgusted with. Well, that's what it says in Exodus chapter 1. That Egypt despised, hated, were disgusted by the Jews. Now, she's birthing on a birthing stool or a birthing chair. They still sell these to this day. Here's an older one, like from the 1600s. I think it's 1500s. She's giving birth on a chair. It's a chair with a big hole in the bottom where the baby comes through. It's a birthing stool. God's Spirit beautified the heavens, right? We saw that. He made the heavens Shifra. He beautified the heavens for Israel, and Shifra beautified Israel for God. See what I'm saying? God made the heavens beautiful. He made it Shifra. And so Shifra made Israel ready for the heavens. You see what I'm saying? She cleansed. She did all this stuff that nobody else would do. She cut the navel cord, she washed the baby with water, she rubbed the baby with salt, she wrapped it in cloths, both her and Pua, and they took care of the nation of Israel that was being born in sextuplets. Hundreds of sextuplets. Now, how can 2 midwives do that for a nation of 2 million people? Or say 1 million people, conservatively. That's impossible. Even if there's only one person who gives birth a day, and there's 6 babies, there's got to be more than 2 midwives. And this is what the rabbis say. Shifra and Pua are not Shifra and Pua. Shifra and Pua were like the ones who were over all the midwives, number one, or they're a title. What do you do for a living? I'm a Pua. What is your title? I'm a Shifra. And you're a midwife, right? Yes, but I'm the Shifra, she's the Pua. And so it was a title for the job. Does that make sense? Why? Because God made the heavens Shifra, and now these guys are going to make Israel Shifra. So what's happening here is it's creating a connection between the heavens and Israel. So my question is there a connection between the heavens and any other people on earth? At this point in history, certainly not. There is no connection with any other people on the planet with heaven. Now, history goes on, the Jews become a people, they develop what God gives them. They do Judaism for 3,000 years. Joshua made them, the Gibeonites, hewers of wood and drawers of water, slaves, for the altar, which means they're in the tabernacle, which no Gentile can go into. And yet, that's where they served. Ezra 8, 220 of the netinim. Now, netinim means what? You remember? Netinim? Given ones. Because David gave these slaves for the service of the house of God to Solomon his son. 220 of the netinim whom David and the officials had given, Natan, for the service of the Levites, all of them by name. 220 Gentiles serving in what was going to be the temple. So, these Gentiles were not in any tribe unless what? Unless they're owned by a Jew, right? Right? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, now if you weren't here for these teachings I've been giving the last few weeks, you might get lost. That's why I gave you bullet points to make it simple. But this is what the story gives us. Over and over and over and over and over again. I'm only giving you a couple scriptures. They were not from any tribe. They were not applied to any tribe unless somebody from a tribe bought a Gentile. And then they own them. And then you are from the tribe of Gad, or you're from the tribe of Issachar. Why? Because I'm from the tribe of Gad, or I'm from the tribe of Issachar, and I own you. And I'm going to teach you about God. They were not Jews. They're never called Jews in the scriptures. Are they?
No, they're Gerim.
They're called, right, they're called Gerim. We saw it in Deuteronomy. That they were called Gerim. They were called Gentiles. Gerim, strangers. Quote, converts. I don't like that phrase, but at least you understand what it means. They were purchased, and then they were immediately circumcised. So, do they look like Jews? If they're circumcised, do they look like Jews?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, they're circumcised. So, they also do Judaism. They did Judaism, complete with the sacrifices. So again, do they look like Jews?
Yep.
Okay. They're circumcised, they're doing Jewish stuff. So to the world, they look at them and go, huh, Jew. It's not deep. It's very, very simple. Some, the Netinim, served in the temple as priests and Levites. Okay. What are they Jews or are they Gentiles?
They're Gentiles.
Are they Jews or Gentiles?
Gentiles.
I've just given you the whole description here, as clear as I can. From this, are they Jews or are they Gentiles?
Gentiles.
I want to say Jews because they're already circumcised.
Okay.
Gentiles.
They're called in the scriptures
Yeah.
Gentiles.
Okay.
That's what they're called. Yet, if you look at them, they look like a Jew.
They're culturally appropriated.
Yes. They've culturally appropriated Judaism. Okay. Yeah, they look like Jews, but they're not. They're Gentiles. And this is what God wanted from the very beginning. He wants a camp with a bunch of Jews and a bunch of Gentiles all looking like Jews. That's it. Very, very, very simple.
Everybody on the same page.
Everybody on the same page. But which ones did Shifra and Puah give birth to?
Jewish ones.
The Jewish ones only. Only. And then for Gentiles to come in, they have to be bought. Okay? This is the pattern God set up. And it's extremely important to understand this. There's a birthing chair. This is an ancient one. I should have looked at the attribution when it's from, and I didn't. I think it's Roman. I think I glanced across that real quick, but I'm not sure. That's a birthing chair made out of stone. Remember, the Pharaoh said, when you see the woman on the avanim, on the stones,
Right.
kill that baby. Avanim, avanim. Genesis 25, 2 nations, Gaim, are in your womb. Now, who's pregnant here? Yeah, Yeah. Very good. Isaac and Rebecca. Rebecca. 2 nations, Gaim, are in your womb, and 2 kingdoms, Leumim, will be separated from your body, and the older will serve the younger. When her day, will what? The older will what?
Serve the younger.
Who's the older?
Ishmael.
Esav, Edom. And who's the younger? Israel, Jacob, right? Who's going to serve who? Esav will serve Israel. The only way Gentiles can get in is to come in as slaves, servants. This was the picture God set up from the beginning. And it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. It puts everybody in the right mindset of where they're supposed to be immediately. And it makes it super simple. The older will serve the younger. When her days to deliver came, there were twins in her womb. Now the first came out red, all over like a hairy garment. And they named him, you'd think it would say, they named him Edom, which means red, right? It's not. They named him Esav. What does Esav mean? It means already made like a man. Esav, it's like aser, to make, to do, right? It's the same, that's where they got aser from asav. It's the same thing in Hebrew. To create, to make, it means complete already. He's already like a man. He's hairy like a man. He's a very hairy man. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding on to Esav's heel. So he was named heel one, or on the heel. Now this is as Israel and Edom. I'm going to show you 3 quotes from encyclopedias that just kind of sum all this up real fast. The name Edom is used by the Talmudists for the Roman Empire. What? The name Edom is used for the Roman Empire. And they applied to Rome every single passage in the Bible referring to Edom or Esav. Every single passage in the Bible where it says Esav or Edom, who's it really talking about? Rome. This is what the rabbis believe. In Leviticus Rabbah 13, Rome under the name of Edom, is compared to a wild pig. And the symbolic name Seir, that was the capital of Edom, was used by poets in the Middle Ages, not only for Rome, but for Christianity. Why? Because Christianity comes from Rome. It's that simple. And the break came. It doesn't matter. Christianity, as Christianity, is based in Rome. Everything about it is Rome. Period. Christianity. Not Jews believing in the Jewish Messiah. The two have nothing whatsoever to do with each other. Nothing. Nothing. They are completely different religions. And that's what the rabbis were seeing, and they saw it in real time. They grew up with it. They saw it over generations. Every single thing that these, quote, Christians, Messiahans are doing is all these followers of Jesus, all they do is Roman Hellenistic stuff. What does that have to do with us? Nothing. And then they come after us to kill us. And then they say, repent. All right, so this was their experience. And you can't discount it because of it doesn't relate to you. This is history. This is from the Jewish Encyclopedia under Esav. Here's 2 more. Edom, the nation supposedly descended from Esav, was also a symbol for Israel's eternal enemy. Edom participated in the destruction of the first temple, and their legendary descendants, the Romans, what? Edom's legendary descendants, the Romans, destroyed the second temple. Herod, the despised agent of Rome, was an actual Edomite. He was one of the very, very last Edomites, like genetically, and that was his family, was from Edom. When Rome embraced Christianity, now that's history. That we have nothing to say about this. It doesn't matter what we think, what we believe, what we've been told, what we've been taught, what we've read. It doesn't matter. This is history. Rome embraced Christianity. And you know how early they embraced Christianity? 103, the year 103.
Really early.
That early. Not 323 with Constantine. That's 200 years later. Damage has already been done. Let's see, the legend of Herod despised. When Rome embraced Christianity, Edom became a symbol for Christian Rome. And then for Christianity in general. I'm going to say this again. This was their real-time experience over generations and generations and generations. We have nothing to say about it. From Encyclopedia of Jewish Symbols. And from the Encyclopedia of the Jewish Religion, the name Esav or Edom is used as an eponym, that means like a nickname, for Rome. And in medieval Hebrew literature for any anti-Jewish regime. Why? Because every anti-Jewish regime that they had any experience with was in Europe, and all of Europe was Christian Europe. Christianity in particular. All right, pretty simple stuff, but very disturbing stuff. Now I just finished the book, Two Nations Are in Your Womb, The Eternal Struggle of Judaism and Christianity. And I'm going to say this, everybody is going to birth. I don't care who they are, it doesn't matter. Everybody's going to birth one of these two kids. They are in our womb. Esav is in your womb. And Israel, Jacob, is in your womb. And you're going to give birth to one of them. And you might give birth to one today and the other tomorrow. And it applies to me too. I have to constantly think, what am I birthing here? What am I thinking here? In this moment, where did this thought come from? Did it come from Judaism? Or did it come from, quote, Christianity or Hellenism? Where did it come from? I don't know where all of my thoughts come from. I got to think about it. And neither do you. Like if we're praying and you go, I don't know, you quote a verse that you heard quoted in prayers somewhere. Why? Why are you quoting that verse? Why? Where did it come from? Why are you thinking that? Where did you hear it quoted? Why are you quoting it? Are you sure it applies? Are you sure that it applies in Judaism? Or are you just sure that it applies in the environment of Hellenism? So we got to think about this stuff constantly. Because I'm telling you, you're going to give birth to something, whether you want to or not. You have been giving birth to something, whether you want to or not. And so have I. Every day. And the things that we multiply, just like those babies being birthed in sextuplets, they came out in litters. And the more Judaism and Jewish stuff and Jewish doctrine and understandings of God from Judaism that you give birth to, the more you're going to put that out into the world. Those babies are going to be born. But adversely, if you keep giving out what you learned in a Hellenistic environment and you give birth to those babies, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to grow up and they're going to produce something. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to go to war with you because they're going to join Egypt, which is exactly what Pharaoh said was going to happen, and they're going to go to war with you because you say, oh, I'm in the Jew camp. Okay, they're coming for you. But you're the one who gave birth to them.
Right.
Does that make sense? I've given this a lot of thought. I've been working on this book for 4 months, every day, every single day. And I have put a lot of thought into this. It's changed the way I'm thinking. This is now the lens through which I'm seeing everything in the scriptures. It was supposed to be the lens that we see everything through the scriptures years ago, but nobody ever taught it to me. This is a huge, huge, huge thing. That from the very beginning, God created these two kids at the same time and said, if you follow one, this is going to happen. If you follow the other, this is going to happen. And it just continues throughout the whole Bible. All the way to the end, all the way through the book of Revelation. Yes?
Back to the whole thing about the 6 children that
They give birth to 6.
They would give birth to 6. In those commentaries, I think it was Rashi that said, the more they tried to kill, or
The more they persecuted the Jews.
persecuted the Jews, the more God was like, birth.
Right,
birth,
exactly.
birth. And
Right. God, hold on, I got to get it on the thing. The more Egypt put pressure on and persecuted the Jews, the more God said, more babies, more babies, more babies.
And basically, that is kind of what's happening right now. With the anti-Semitism
Yes.
that's going on, what it's doing is producing more people that are going, I want Judaism.
Yes.
I want God.
The more,
I want God in the purity
yes,
of-
it's always been like that. It happened during the Holocaust. That the more the Jews are persecuted, the more, for some reason, people sort of wake up to the whole Jew thing. And they go, well, what's that? Ooh, I think I might want that. It's always been like that. I need to move on.
Wait, the very last thing. The whole idea of being a slave, coming in as a slave into Judaism, that entire thing is also in what we call the New Testament, where it says you're a slave to sin, or you're a slave to
Yes.
God. Basically.
Well, I said it goes all the way through the Bible, all the way through the book of Revelation.
Right.
It happens over and over and over and over again that God says, Gentiles, you can only come in as what?
A slave.
As what? A slave or a servant. Period. Why? Because Edom will serve Israel. And by the way, there's something like 50 verses in the Bible that say this. I don't know if you know that. So we're going to give birth to either Israel or Edom. You will. You are already. I want to actually read from the Bible. I'm going to read from the Bible, which I never do. I always have the scriptures up on the screen. Acts chapter 16. This is one of my favorite narratives in the whole Bible. Because it says just the opposite of what everybody thinks it should say. So this is in Acts 16 where Shaul and his friends are going around the cities, and to each city they go to the synagogue first, where they meet God-fearers and Jews, and they teach them about Yeshua 3 Shabbats in a row. And they allow Paul to speak in the synagogues. Why? Because he's a rabbi. They're not unfamiliar with him. So in chapter 16, verse 14, a certain woman, no, let's go down. Verse 16, it happened as we were going to a place of prayer. What would that be? A synagogue. A certain slave girl having a spirit of divination met us, who was bringing her masters a lot of money from fortune telling. Following after Shaul and us, there's several of them, she kept crying out saying, these men are bondservants, slaves of El Elyon. Jews are God's slaves. Edom, the Gentiles, will serve Israel as slaves. That's God's order. We're his slaves, and we bring the Gentiles to God. That's God's order. We are a light to the nations. And they're proclaiming to you the Derech Yeshua, the way of salvation. And she continued doing this for a bunch of days, and then finally Shaul gets so annoyed, and he turned and he said to the spirit, I charge you, I establish for you in the name of Yeshua the Messiah to come out of her. And it came out that very time period. I don't know what time period it is. Well, we don't know. But when her masters saw that their hope of profit was gone, so they're going to lose money, they seized Shaul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the authorities. Jewish situation or Gentile situation? Gentile. Jewish court or Gentile court? Answer me.
Gentile.
Gentile court. Jewish authorities or Gentile authorities?
Again, Gentile.
Gentiles. Jewish accusers or Gentile accusers? Gentile. And when they had brought them to the chief magistrates, Gentile magistrates, they said, this is what they said, these men are throwing our city into confusion because they're Jews. Not because they're Christians, because they're Jews.
Right.
And they're proclaiming, and this is the part I just love, it doesn't say doctrines. It doesn't say beliefs. It doesn't say things to think about. It says customs, which means things you do. Acts that you do. Which it is not lawful for us to accept or to observe. We can't do that because we're Romans. Now, why can't Romans do Judaism?
Because it was outlawed.
It was outlawed, that's right. By law, they wrote this down. The Romans wrote many, many times why Romans were not allowed to do Judaism. And this is what Paul's preaching. So, to me, it's amazing that they're preaching Yeshua. But all the Romans hear is, what's all this Jew stuff? You're telling us about Jewish stuff to do? We can't do that. So they're Judaizing. And this was the proper way that it worked. Gentiles can only come in believing in Yeshua as slaves or servants of Israel. And then Israel will bring the Gentiles to God. Now we're gonna look at scripture that I never look at with Lev Tzion. I've never taught it and I've never brought it up in all my teachings. And it's the book of Jacob, or James. You know why I never bring it up? Because Gentiles can't handle it. Do you know what the Gentile theologians call the book of James? Or James himself? Anybody know? The prophet of dust.
Dust?
The prophet of wind. In other words, he's feathers. He's got no authority. He's a lightweight. He talks about stuff that's kind of dumb. That's what the Gentile theologians say about Jacob. You know why? He's so Jewish. And they don't like it. What use is it, my brothers, if someone says he has emunah, he has faith? In Judaism, where do we get our faith from? What was he proclaiming?
Customs.
Customs and traditions. That's where we get our faith from. What we do. It's not what we believe. It's what we do. And what we believe comes from what we do. The things that we do talk to us and preach to us and show us about God. And so we get faith from it. It's what we do in Judaism. If someone says he has faith but he has no acts, we call it works in the Bible. I don't know why they translate it works. That's a bad translation of the word ma'asim, which means deeds or just things you do. Things you do.
Customs.
Customs, right. If someone says he has faith but he doesn't do anything, can that faith, oh, look at that. What does that say? Can you read it or no? Can you see it?
Yeah.
What is that word?
Save.
I didn't translate that differently. Can that faith, that emunah, that understanding save him if he doesn't do anything? This is why Gentiles don't like Jacob. And the answer is no. No, it can't. It can't save him. It can't bring him salvation. It can't save him out of anything. If a brother or sister, now what's a brother or sister in first century? A Jew. If a Jew is without clothing and in need of daily food, and one of you says, go in shalom, be warmed, be filled, and you don't give them what's necessary, what good is it?
None.
In other words, there's no acts. There's no ma'asim. There's no deeds. Even so, in the same way, faith, if it has no works, deeds, no good deeds,
No evidence.
it's dead. It's dead. It's dead. Faith without works is useless. Wasn't Abraham our father justified by works? Deeds? By what he did? What did he do? What did Abraham do? He did Judaism. He did Judaism. Genesis 26:5. He did Judaism. And he was justified by it. He was saved by it. I know that word saved is like it triggers me. It's a minefield. But if it bothers you, it's because you don't know what saved means.
Right.
Faith was working with his works. And as a result of the works, by what he did, faith was perfected, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness because of what he did. And he was called the friend of God. Okay, there it is. If you want to be the friend of God, do Judaism. If you don't. It's up to you. And he was called the friend of God. For just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without doing something is dead. And the doing something is Jewish stuff. Can you close that curtain for me, please? What is done, what's supposed to be done, is Jewish stuff, Judaism. Now that means both Jew and Gentile. Now, why am I saying all this? Because of this. Shifra and Puah perfected Israel by bringing those babies into the world. God perfected the heavens for Israel. And so he called it Shifra. He called the heavens Shifra. What did Shifra do? What did this chick do? She gave birth to Israel. Israel. That's the heavens. The heavens give birth to the Jews, not the world. The world gives birth to the Gentiles. And then the Jews who are birthed from heaven say, come, I'll show you. I'll show you God. I'll teach you. I'll bring you to God. But you got to know your place. Okay? It's a very simple construct. It's just very hard to keep in your mind all the time, unless you really think about it. So that's what I want to say. I hope it makes sense. All that came from Shifra and Puah. But it's something you're really going to have to wrestle with to figure out. Like, why did God make this construct from the very beginning of the Bible and then bring it all the way through to the end of Gentiles serving Israel, of Edom serving Israel or Jacob, and that they come in as slaves? That's how they come in. Let's pray. Abba, thank you so much that you have created your template, your perfect plan and guideline and just curriculum even, the way things are supposed to work and the way things are supposed to be taught and what is supposed to be taught and what we're supposed to know. And I thank you, Lord, for opening our understanding to know exactly and precisely what you're saying. Not what we've been taught, not what we think, but what you gave your people from the very beginning, the understandings you gave from the very beginning of your people, so that we can know that stuff. We want to know that stuff. And I ask you to open up our heart to receive that stuff and open our mind to understand it. In the name of Yeshua. Thank you, Abba. Shabbat Shalom.